Well, Jamie, you normally tee us up on these things by kind of setting the stage, but today I wanted to start out a little bit differently. This one, what we're going to talk about today, this one hits kind of close to home to me. By now, I suspect that most people watching this video are familiar with the helicopter that struck the radio tower here in Houston a few days ago. Today is the 23rd of October as we record this, so it's only been 3 days ago. But for those of our viewers that have not heard the news or seen it, basically, an R44 Robinson was operating as an aerial tour helicopter, 4 people on board, the pilot, 3 passengers, including a child. And at least as of this moment, the victims' IDs haven't been released to the general public. But the helicopter departed Ellington, which is an airport south of Houston, about 8 o'clock ish Sunday night, flying 600 feet. And just a few minutes after they took off, they impacted a radio station tower, 1,000-foot tower. And of course, you can imagine the outcome. Nobody survived, and the tower went down. It's a 1,000-foot tower. There's 3 of them in fairly close proximity. This particular one sat by itself about 1.5 miles from the other 2, just barely inside of the Class B surface area of Hobby Airport. And the lights had been NOTAMed out a few days before. An interesting piece of information is that tower had just changed hands too, about 10 days before the crash. So I know I've done a lot of talking here, but like I said, this one hits a little bit close to home. And I've flown by that tower before. I know exactly where it's located. Not easy to see during the daytime in the clutter. And I can only imagine at night with one light for sure was operating. But I don't want us to turn this into a bash the pilot video any more than we have done it in the past when we've talked about some accidents. That pilot, she unfortunately paid the ultimate price along with the victims of the crash. But rather to point out how important it is to check NOTAMs. So I've talked enough, Jamie.
No, I'm with you on this. These are painful because they do happen. They happen here. And I have a friend I fly with every once in a while. He's a little bit older than we are. And he started flying when he was just a kid in the mid 60s here locally. And when I had my Cub, we'd fly around and we often flew at 500 feet, but you would have to move your route a little bit because of towers. And I remember him telling me, when he was young, you could fly at 500 feet all day in Central Florida and there was nothing to hit. You were fine.
Yeah.
Well, now we have towers that go up to 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
You've actually got to be on the lookout. And daytime is one thing. Nighttime, when this accident out in your neck of the woods happened, man, there can be issues. And I'll toss this out there because this might be the thing that sparks my emotional reaction to yours. September 11th, 2004, we had a Piper Aztec hit a tower right near here. I was doing part-time photography for a local newspaper then, so I got sent out to cover this.
Yeah.
It was the year of the 3 hurricanes. Hurricane Charlie had come through, and they use airplanes to spray for mosquitoes here when we have a lot of water because we have a lot of mosquitoes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Piper Aztec, and the tower they hit was on the chart, and it was marked as a lighted tower. But 2 hours before the 5:30 a.m. accident, when it's dark, 2 hours before at 3:30, there was a car accident that took out power to the region.
Oh, boy.
So what was marked as a lighted tower was no longer lighted, and they hit it just 20 feet from the top. So you beyond the NOTAMs, you really do have to pay attention to what are those towers. And, unfortunately, if I'm not mistaken, the one that got hit out by you is actually just shy of 1,000 feet. So it's the smaller symbol that's used for towers less than 1,000 feet, not the larger symbol. So it would be easy to just go, oh, that's no big deal.
Well, except that this is showing a larger symbol. If you look on the sectional chart, and perhaps we can edit a picture of that into this discussion. It's actually the larger symbol adjacent to the two other towers that are a mile and a half away from it. So it shows as being 1,000 foot tower. And in fact, on the chart, it's I think it's 1,047 MSL, which puts it just shy of maybe 1,000 feet AGL. But nonetheless, it has the big symbol. So it was visible. And the scary thing about these things is that here in Houston, for example, there we have something called the Tower Farm, and it's just south of town, about 5 miles north of Houston Southwest Airport, and it's a cluster of 5 or 6 towers, all of which are 2,000 feet tall.
Hmm.
And from our airport, if I chart a direct line to Galveston for lunch, for example, that line takes me almost directly through that tower farm. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the tops of those towers actually extend up into Class Bravo airspace for hobby surface area. So you really can't fly over the top of them unless you're talking to ATC, and they're familiar with the tower farm, and they will offer you vectors around or over them, so that's not a problem. But further than that, once you get past those towers, again on pretty much a straight line down to Galveston, there are three 2,000 foot towers on the way to Galveston, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. Two of them sit close to one another, and another one sits quite a distance away. But they're 2,000 foot towers, literally in the middle of nowhere. And if you're not familiar with the route, if you're not looking at your sectional chart, boy, I mean, they're targets ready to hit on the way from Houston to Beaumont. There are three 2,000 foot towers on a direct line to Beaumont. On the way up to Hilltop Lakes from Houston, it's just a popular lunch spot. There's a 2,000 foot tower literally in the middle of nowhere. So, to your point, years and years ago, before cell phones and before the technology that allowed for towers to be that tall, you literally could fly just about treetop level almost anywhere in this country and not worry about anything at all. Those days are long gone, long gone.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have the same thing here, and I suspect it's all around America. A little bit north of Orlando's the Orange City Towers, multiple towers, 2,000 feet. Just to east of Orlando, there's a whole cluster of them, like you're talking about. And I've been vectored right over them by air traffic control before, and it's creepy. It's like a kraken reaching up from the depths of the ocean. It's just creepy to be over them. But this is one of those things. You bring up the NOTAMs, which is something we should pay attention to when they're talking about tower lighting being out and it's daytime. Maybe you're not so in tune with it, but if it's going to be night, that's a big deal. I think the other thing, you've got to treat this like, what's my minimum en route altitude based on the obstacles that are going to be around? And if I'm going to be flying low like a helicopter tour, and I'm not making fun of this woman at
No, I
all,
understand.
you've got to have landmarks that you're going to be using, that I know if I'm over this landmark, I'm not near that obstacle. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of obstacles. When I used to fly in Connecticut, there was a field just to the west of Hartford called Robertson. It's in a valley, but at the top of the ridge line, there's television towers
Mm-hmm.
that are quite high with guy lines coming off of
Mm-hmm.
them. So you really don't want to fly a wide pattern there, because beyond the tower, there's the wires that support the tower. We really have to be aware of what's out there for obstacles, and some of the weirder ones that I know other people don't get. Over here in Florida on the East Coast and down in the Keys, we have observation balloons on a tether that go up to 14,000
Right.
feet. Man, you don't want to hit that tether.
Yeah.
So give it a wide berth.
Yeah, we have the same thing here in South Texas, close to the border. We have some of those observation balloons as well. The 91-119 talks about minimum safe altitudes, and it says over congested areas, basically 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a horizontal radius of 2,000 feet of the aircraft, and uh, other than congested airspace, it talks about 500 feet above the surface, and there's some other caveats there. And that's paragraphs B and C, by the way, of that particular reg. But if you go down to paragraph D, talking about helicopters, it said it'll say, in fact, I'm reading it right now. A helicopter may be operated at less than the minimums prescribed in paragraph B or C, which is 1,000 feet, 500 feet, of this section, provided each person operating the helicopter complies with any routes or altitudes specifically prescribed for helicopters by the FAA. To my knowledge, there wasn't any particular route on this particular flight. Perhaps there was. If it was, it probably was something, a letter of authorization from the local FSDO that allowed them to fly a particular route. But certainly from a regulatory standpoint, as far as I know, there weren't any prescribed routes for this, certainly not for this particular flight. There's also an advisory circular out there. It's AC 70 slash 7460 1 L as in Lima. It's a 90-page document, Jamie, 14 chapters and 2 appendices. And it's recommendations that the FAA has for obstructions. And in kind of looking through some of this stuff, it's interesting that the FCC has the regulatory authority on some of these markings, and typically they incorporate by reference the FAA's recommendations into their section of the CFRs, which happens to be Part 47. So it's easy to go down a rabbit trail, when you're looking into some of this and realize that there are so many different regulatory agencies and so many different rules and regulations and so on and so forth that cover these kind of things. But at the end of the day, the only way that we're going to know about things like tower lighting outages is by reading the NOTAMs. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't want to be critical of the pilot here because we don't know, and I absolutely will not speculate on it one way or the other, but perhaps that could have helped prevent the accident. But we'll never know.
Well, that's the thing. This is not a leading cause of accidents in
No.
aviation, but they are very often fatal when they happen, and they are avoidable. So we have to take that on ourselves as pilot in command. How do we avoid this situation? And like the one I was talking about in Lake Wales, Florida, where they impacted the tower 20 feet from the top. If you're 1 foot from the top, it doesn't matter. If you impact the steel structure with a moving aircraft, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
So we have to make real efforts to keep in mind, yeah, the chart says it's lit, but is it really? And are there landmarks I can use to keep me well away from that? Like you, I can't disparage the pilot because unfortunately she paid for whatever caused this. But generally, we try to help people think about the future and how to keep themselves safe, just as you and I try to keep ourselves safe when we fly. This is a preventable thing, but it's about planning. As you say, read the NOTAMs, look at the chart, pick an appropriate altitude, have some landmarks to keep you clear of these things. Think about that consciously, because while it doesn't happen a lot, it does happen. And when it happens, they're bad.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was kind of important for us to talk a little bit about this today because it is kind of fresh in certainly top of my mind because it does hit so close to home. And boy, if we can keep one person from making that kind of mistake, then we've done our job, Jamie.
I appreciate it. I think it's a great topic. I think it's very timely, and unfortunately, it's necessary to discuss this sort of thing. So, thanks so much. Viewers, please take heed of this advice from the wonderful Pat Brown. Keep yourself safe. Read those NOTAMs, even though they're weird and they're not written well, or call up and get the briefing from 1-800 Weather Brief and pay attention to that part. Click like on the video. Leave us a comment below. How do you deal with obstacles that might be along your path? And of course, subscribe to the channel so you can come back in the future and see helpful information like this from folks like me and Pat.
Adios, my friend.